And this is where all of the content is for our presentation today. So I'm going to talk about what the big picture actually is, first of all. Then I'm going to move on to why you should use the big picture technique in your Prezi designs. I'm also going to talk about how you can find your big picture. Obviously, all of our subjects that we present on are all going to be very, very different. So how can we take that subject and actually find a really nice big picture visual to use to house all of that content, just like I've done on the screen you can see in front of you right now. And then finally, I'm going to show you a few ways that you can actually build your big picture in Prezi. Now, we don't want to turn you all into designers, but we do want to give you a bit of a head start, on the other 50 million people that are trying to use Prezi and get the most out of it right now. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is talk about what the big picture technique is. And there's a term at the top of the screen there that says visual metaphor. Hopefully you all have heard that term in the past, a visual metaphor. And the big picture is really the same thing. There's probably a few people out there that might argue there are slight differences in what a visual metaphor is and what the big picture technique is, but let's not get bogged down with the science of this thing. A big picture is really just one image that says it all. So let's look at some visual metaphors to give you an idea of what I mean. Here is a visual metaphor for Volkswagen. So any of you who are lucky enough to walk into a Volkswagen showroom and buy one of their new cars at the moment, you'll probably be given the option of a park assist system, which means your car will park itself for you, which sounds pretty futuristic and something we would only see in science fiction movies, but it's becoming pretty standard. So this is their visual for getting across the importance and the benefits of that parking system. So we've got the porcupine in the middle of the screen there, parking itself in between some goldfish who are in some plastic bags. Obviously, if that porcupine touches any of those bags, there's going to be a serious accident. So that's one of the benefits of their system. The second visual metaphor, I don't really need to explain to you really. It's obviously all about global warming. We've got the earth there on the top of an ice cream cone that's actually melting. So you pretty much know what that subject is about as soon as you see it. Another really nice visual metaphor I saw a while ago, New Balance trying to promote their running trainers, actually put the trainers together along with some headphones and some water bottles in the background there to form the shape of a heart. So the visual metaphor there, the big picture, is them saying to their audience, our trainers keep your heart healthy. Okay, so really, really nice message. And this one's a little bit blurry, but I thought I'd just show it to you anyway because it's quite funny. Any of you guys out there who smoke, and I'm just pointing to someone in the office who I know smokes here as well. Any of you guys out there who at the moment smoke, this is an advert trying to point out to you that there are some side effects of smoking that might become quite obvious in the bedroom department. And I'll leave your imaginations to figure out what that's all about. Okay, so really, really interesting and a really simple way of getting that message across. Those are visual metaphors. So when we talk about the big picture, we're really talking about what is that one image that will say it all. So what's that one image that you can use in your Prezi that's going to help people really, have that light bulb moment when they really understand what it's really all about. Okay, so let's take that a step further. Why would you use that kind of technique in Prezi? So like I've done with this screen right here, I've obviously put all of my content inside picture frames because I'm talking about the big picture. So there is a visual link to the content I'm talking about and what you can see on the screen. So why is that important? Why would that actually matter in your presentation design? Why does it matter to your audience as well? Well, first of all, let's think about your role. So when you're building your presentation in Prezi, you become the presentation designer, of course. And my guess is that probably some of you, maybe not all of you, but some of you who are on this webinar right now will have come across problems in the past when you're working on your Prezi canvas and you insert a piece of content somewhere and then you move around your Prezi canvas and you can't find that content that you added. I know that when I first started using Prezi years and years ago, this was a really common issue that I had. I would insert a piece of content, I would then move somewhere else in my Prezi canvas, and I just wouldn't be able to find that initial content that went in. So, why does that happen, and why does that become so difficult? Well, it's because people are trying to use the entire canvas. Okay, if you use a big picture, one visual, that will actually force you to keep all of your content in one small part of the Prezi canvas. And as the presentation designer, that's going to make your life much, much easier. You shouldn't lose any of your content because you won't be using every single inch of the Prezi canvas. So hopefully that makes sense. Another reason is that by using that small space in the canvas and just working inside of your big picture, you should actually manage to avoid what we call death by Prezi. And this is what we talked about in our previous webinar a couple of weeks ago. So for any of you who don't know what death by Prezi is, it's too much of this. Too much zooming and spinning around. It's not a good look at all. Okay, and that is one of the webinars that we will be repeating. Now, another great reason why it's really good to use the big picture technique is because it enables you to tap into something that's called spatial memory. Okay, so to explain what that is, I just want to ask each of you to think of 4 electrical items in your kitchen. So hopefully you've done that pretty quickly. I didn't need to pause for that long, to be honest with you. Now, my guess is that when I asked you that question, think of 4 electrical items in your kitchen, you didn't actually have a bullet point list of items appearing in your brains. What actually happened is you visualized your kitchen, you saw an image of it pretty instantly, because you were probably there this morning trying to, get your breakfast and get your coffee down you before you rushed out the door to work. And then you actually saw where those electrical items were in your kitchen. You visualized that space and you saw where those objects were. Now that's called spatial memory, and that's how everybody's brain works. We've evolved over millions and millions of years, and the reason why you can all get up for work in the morning without getting lost on your way to the office is because you remember that journey, landmarks along the way, and that's your spatial memory working for you. It helps you know how to leave your front door and get to the office. Okay. So the same thing was happening there when I asked you to think of 4 electrical items. So this isn't something I'm just making up. This is a real thing. So if you look at spatial memory on Wikipedia or just Google it, you'll see that there are lots and lots of different explanations of what that is, but they all basically are linking to neuroscience and psychology. Now, working with a big picture in your Prezi enables you to tap into this part of your audience's brains, and that should mean that they actually remember a lot more of what you show them, because they're not trying to remember lists of bullet points that they might see on PowerPoint slides. They can actually remember a visual and a journey into it or around it. So you're tapping into that part of the brain, and that's the part of Prezi I love the most. I think it's absolutely brilliant that we can use that. Now, another reason why you should use this technique in your Prezis is to help you use the element of surprise. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at this detail. Let's imagine that in our Prezi, we're actually going to introduce a character, and that might be something you do quite a lot in the storytelling of your presentation. It's always good to introduce a character, talk about their problems, and then hopefully the audience can relate to that. We can also then, of course, zoom in on more details. We could zoom right into the character's brain if we wanted to. There's literally no limit on where we can take the audience. But we can use that element of surprise that I talked about to actually then zoom out at the end of our presentation and reveal something that maybe wasn't there at the beginning. So we could show that character in an environment that we didn't see at the very start. And that's very, very easy to do. And again, that's that big picture technique. Let's talk about the character, or maybe talk about the product, whatever kind of line of work you're in. Obviously, that will apply to you. And then let's zoom out to see that character or that product in their actual, working environment. And that can just make it much more real for the audience, and they will remember and retain a lot more of that information. So if you're thinking to yourself, why should I use this big picture technique? There are a few reasons for you there, and there's probably others that I just don't have time to go into in much more detail. Okay. So hopefully from that, you now know what the big picture technique is. You understand why you should use it. Let's take a quick look at how you actually figure out what your own big picture could be, because I'm guessing that some of you out there at the moment probably have some pretty dry subjects that you need to talk about. I know for a fact that there are people on this call who are in work for travel agents, and there are other people who work for solicitors and lawyers and things like that. So there's a wide range of subjects that you're all going to be talking about, and I'm guessing you're all here because you want to try and make your information a bit more interesting. So it really doesn't matter how dry or how boring you think your subject is. There will be a really interesting big picture that we can find for it. And I would challenge any of you on this webinar, I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot saying this, but I would challenge all of you to actually give me a subject that you present on and see if I can't come up with a really good picture for it, because obviously I do this for a living. If I couldn't find a good big picture for your subject, then I wouldn't really be able to call myself a Prezi expert. So I've not been undone from that yet. So I challenge you all, maybe go onto Twitter after this and mention your subject, and I'll see if I can come up with some things for you on there. So let's have a look then at the third part of this. How do we find our big picture? How do we actually come up with a really nice visual to use? Well, the thing that I do first is I figure out before anything what my core message is going to be. Okay, so I'll explain a little bit more in just a second what I mean by my core message. But it's really, really important that you don't go anywhere near the Prezi software until you know exactly what your core message is. So I'll go into more detail in that in just a second. Once I know what my core message is, I then start planning my presentation, and I use a technique called mind mapping. And this is something I've talked about quite a lot in previous webinars already. Mind mapping is a great technique for planning your Prezi. So again, I'll show you a bit more detail on that in just a second. One thing I also do is I write my script. So I didn't just wait until 3:45 UK time and then think about what I was going to say to you guys on this webinar. I've actually written the script for what you're listening to right now, and I've practiced it 3 times. Okay, so that little hiccup I had with the technical issues at the start, most of the time that would completely panic a lot of presenters, but it didn't faze me at all, mainly because I do this for a living and I know not to let that kind of thing faze me, but also because I know exactly where I was, I knew exactly where to start off from again, and I know what I'm going to talk about next. Okay, I've practiced this a lot because I had that really good script in place. So I'll show you how I write my scripts in just a second as well. So let's start with the core message then. What do I mean by core message? Well, to give you an example, a lot of the time we get phone calls into the office with people who want to use Prezi. They're using PowerPoint at the moment. They've got a big event coming up, and they normally give us a brief that sounds something like this. Make me look awesome is pretty much what people say to me on a day-to-day basis. They want to look absolutely awesome in front of their audiences. And of course, that's something that we can do. What they then do is they show us the PowerPoint presentation that they want us to convert. So, they sort of send us the PowerPoint and say, here are our slides. And it's normally your typical PowerPoint presentation. They talk about when the company was founded, that they're the best in the world at what they do. They've got X amount of numbers of staff. They talk about their CEO, how many offices they've got. You get the idea, blah, 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 blah. And it goes on and on and on. And one thing I always say once they've gone through all of those slides, is what is it you're actually trying to say here? And that phases quite a lot of people. Quite a lot of people, when I ask them that, they say to me, well, I've just shown you my slide. Surely you know what I'm trying to say. And the answer is no, I don't. You've told me when the company was founded. You've told me who your CEO is. You've told me how many offices you've got. But what is it you actually want people to remember at the end of this presentation? What's that core message that people have to walk away knowing? And sometimes people just don't think about that. I come across a lot of managing directors, CEOs, a lot of really experienced presenters who actually build presentations and deliver presentations on a regular basis without ever thinking about what their core message is. And if they would just do that, they would find that their audience engagement would go up probably 500%, even without using Prezi. Just thinking about that core message would really help them. So one of the things that I tend to do quite a lot is I ask them to write me their core message on a post-it note. So that's one thing I did at the start of preparing this presentation for you guys. I actually grabbed a post-it note and I started to write my core message. And when I first did it, it looked something like this. So it was the big picture message is really useful in Prezi because it helps you get creative and also means that your Prezi will be more memorable for audience members. Now, that's an okay core message, but it's quite long-winded. So I actually changed that quite a few times. And in the end, my core message, my one thing that I want everyone on this webinar to understand is that the big picture technique makes your message more powerful and more memorable. And that's it. So everything that I'm talking about and everything I've put into this presentation is all focused on that core message. At no stage in this presentation am I going to ramble on about things that don't matter to you and don't matter to that core message. There will be nothing outside of that. Okay? For one, people don't have the time to sit here and listen to me waffling on about stuff that they didn't sign up for. You signed up for this webinar. This is what you want to know about. So that's my core message, and that's where I started. Okay? The next step, of course, was to actually then grab a pen and a piece of paper and start planning the content. So once I had that core message, what's the content that's going to be around that? What am I actually going to talk about to make sure we hit that core message, hit that objective? So here's the mind map for this session. You can see it's a little bit messy, but that doesn't matter at all because no one else would normally see this. This is just a document created by me for me to help me create a great presentation. And you can see that in the center of the screen here, I've got my subject using the big picture technique. And then around the outside, we've got those subheadings. What is a big picture? Why should I use the big picture in my Prezis? And how do I come up with my big pictures? Okay. And it was quite obvious straight away when I started mapping that out that this was going to be my big picture. The subject I've got is pretty easy to figure out, or at least I think it's pretty easy to figure out what a really nice big picture would be to make it very nice and visual and to help you guys remember what we're talking about. Okay, it's kind of, I would consider it a no-brainer. If I used anything else other than picture frames, I think it would have to be pretty good sort of link to what we're talking about. So this was a no-brainer for me, really. So I probably spent about 25 or maybe 30 minutes mind mapping the presentation on that piece of paper there. But I didn't go anywhere near Prezi until I had all of that down on paper. I had my core message and I had my plan. And from that mind map, I can also figure out the flow of my presentation. So where am I going to start? Where am I going to move to next? How is that going to lead on to the next subject? And of course, where are we going to finish up to make sure I give you guys a really nice overview of everything? And again, I reinforce that core message. Okay, so quite a lot of time spent there, but time well spent because the end results are well worth it. The final thing, of course, is to then write my script. Now, I just want to make this clear that this is how I like to prepare my presentations. I wouldn't be comfortable presenting to anyone unless I've written a script, word for word, what I'm going to say. And of course, I go outside of that, because you do ad lib when you're presenting and you talk about other things, or you respond to questions or technical difficulties, and things like that. So you do go outside of the script. But for me, that's the best way for me to feel absolutely comfortable in what I'm going to talk about, and absolutely comfortable in the fact I'm going to hit my core message. Okay. Now, some of you out there might be thinking, well, I don't like to present from a script. I feel uncomfortable doing that. That's absolutely fine, but at least spend some time thinking about, maybe just highlight a few key words of what you're going to talk about in each of the sections of your presentation. You don't have to write it word for word like I do. That's just my way. So long as you do have some kind of plan that you stick to, I think that's the most important thing. Okay, so let's just have a look at an example here again. So we've got our presenter who uses PowerPoint, and they waffle on about the company that they founded and that they're the best in the world. And, a lot of the reason why PowerPoint presentations aren't very effective right now is actually nothing to do with PowerPoint. It's not PowerPoint's fault at all. It's the fact that the presenter hasn't thought about their core message, hasn't planned their presentation, and hasn't written their script. So they waffle on about subjects that don't really matter. There is no core message, and by the end of it, their audience just doesn't really know what the point of it was. What are they supposed to remember? Is the core message the fourth bullet point on slide 24? Probably not. And it just all seems a bit of a waste of time. And I see so many really important presentations like that. And I just think that it's such a shame that they didn't spend half an hour at least thinking about the core message, planning it on paper, writing a bit of a script before they went anywhere near PowerPoint or Prezi. Okay, so doing that first of all of that planning, putting all of that planning in place will give you that light bulb moment when you realize what your big picture should be. Sometimes you'll figure that out right at the very beginning. When you start to think about your core message, straight away you might think, actually, I know what a great background image would be to house all of this content. Even if that happens at stage 1, I would still move on to stage 2 with your mind mapping. I find that my big pictures normally come out of my mind mapping stage, but I still then move on to stage 3 and write my script, because that just helps make me more confident as the presenter. So all of those 3 steps are geared towards helping you figure out what your big picture should be. And one of the things I want to mention here as well is that you don't need to be a designer or have a design degree or be in the slightest bit creative to actually figure out what your big picture or what your visual metaphor is going to be for your presentation. And I'm not just saying that to try and sell Prezi to you in any way. I'm not here to do that. I run training sessions in Prezi all the time, where, from people who've used PowerPoint for 20 or 30 years. And a lot of those people start the session by saying, I'm not creative at all, you're going to have to bear with me. By the end of the session, they are really, really surprised at the presentation and the big picture visuals they've come up with, because I've forced them to follow this process. Okay, so it genuinely does help you think in the way that your brain is supposed to think. And I think that's the biggest difference between PowerPoint and Prezi. Prezi really lends itself to help your brain think of things visually, whereas PowerPoint really restricts you. We don't think of things in a slide by slide way or in a bullet point by bullet point way. And Prezi frees you up to just let your brain go crazy, let your imagination go crazy, really. But you need to work in a certain way in order for that to happen. And you may find that if you're brand new to Prezi, you'll need to go through this process quite a few times before you really start to see great results. So don't expect this to happen on your first try. For some of you it may, but not for all of you. Okay, but if you stick with it after 3 or 4 Prezi designs, you will definitely see some great results. So we've talked about what the big picture is, why you should use it, and of course, how you can find your big picture. It's really, really important. So once you've got all of that stuff in place, how do you actually build your big picture? You know, I said at the start of this, and I repeated myself a second ago, I don't want to turn any of you into designers. I'm guessing that some of you are in the training sector, learning and development. There's probably some salespeople on here, marketing. None of you want to be designers, and that's absolutely fine. You don't need to be a designer at all to build a great Prezi. And just as a little aside, actually, one thing to mention is that every single visual you see in this presentation today is all done in Prezi. So this big picture you can see right now is one of the free Prezi templates, and all of the icons and everything that you can see as we go through are actually icons from the symbols and shapes in Prezi as well. So even though I have a design background, you know, I'm quite strapped for time. So I've just relied on all of the stuff that's already there in Prezi for me to do this. So let's have a look at how you can do it. How can you build your own big picture? There's a few ways I want to suggest. And the first way is obviously the quickest. And that's once you have your core message, your mind map, and maybe a bit of a script in place, you're going to have a really good idea of what you want your Prezi to look like, but maybe you don't have the time, maybe you don't feel that confident enough, or you just don't want to build the Prezi. You know, it might be that simple. Hire a designer. There are lots of designers out there who can help you out. Some of you may have design departments if you're lucky enough to be working for a business that provides that. And you know, a webinar wouldn't be complete without a shameless sales plug. So just just so you know, this is something that we are pretty good at. And if you do want to find out more about our Prezi design services, then you can just email info@thepresenter.com, and we'd be delighted to help you out. Our portfolio is also on our website. You can see the work pages there of some of the other great Prezis we've built for customers. So I'm sorry, I had to get it in there somewhere, but that's the quickest way. You know, get someone else to do it for you. But even if you do that, you know, even if you came to us to ask us to build your Prezi, we would still get you to go through those steps that I mentioned. So I would still want to know what's your core message. I would still, you know, work with you to plan everything, and I'd want to see some kind of script from you as well, because we can't just take your PowerPoint slides and look great without knowing what your core message is. Okay, so really, really important. The second way is if you don't want to hire a designer and you want to have a go at it yourself, then there are lots of really great online image libraries that you can use. One of my favorite is Shutterstock. So it's shutterstock.com. If any of you want to have a look at that once the webinar is done, I would really recommend going on there and just doing a quick search for images and see what comes up. Also, you have iStock, which is another really popular online image library, and Getty Images is another really popular one as well. So once you've done all of your planning that I just talked about a second ago, you might have a really good idea of what your background image needs to be. If you're not going to hire a designer to build that for you, have a look at those online image libraries and, you know, do a quick search, and maybe you'll find a really nice image on there that you can just pay for, download, and drop into your Prezi. Okay. The third way is if you don't want to hire a designer and if you don't have the budget to buy imagery from a source online, you can actually just try and build your own big picture inside Prezi itself. So let's say, for example, that I was building a Prezi to talk about an endangered species of penguin. I know that's a bit random, but I use this example in training quite a lot. So the first thing I would do is I would open up Prezi, and inside Prezi there is actually a Google image option. So you can search for Google images directly from the Prezi software. And one of the things that I would say to do, a really useful tip, is to put .png at the very end of your search term. So that's on the screen for you at the moment, and you can see the iceberg that I've searched for. To get that image, I just typed in iceberg .png. Now, a PNG image will normally have a transparent background, which means, of course, if we want to place some penguins on that iceberg and zoom in, we can actually do the same thing. So we can search for penguin.png and place them on top of that iceberg. And that gives us loads of flexibility. It means that we can place penguins all over the iceberg and we can move from one to the other. You know, we might want to do a search for a shark, maybe shark.png, and put those under the water. Maybe they're hunting the penguins and that's why they're becoming endangered. You can really let your imagination run wild and build up your own big picture visuals quite easily in Prezi. So, of course, not all of you are going to be working in wildlife protection. Some of you, like I said, you might be a travel agent, you might be a lawyer. Whatever your subject is, once you have that big picture, have a go at trying to build something yourself in Prezi. Really, really great. And again, it really, really helps you just become creative, even if you're not a creative person. You know, the world is your oyster, really. You can take your audience wherever you want to go. If you can find the right images, you can bring them in and place them wherever you want them to be. So that's one of the things I love most about Prezi. And in our training sessions that we run, it's really, really great to see people who say, I'm not creative, come up with these really, really creative big pictures by the end of the training session. So we've gone through quite a lot of content there in quite a short space of time. And like I said, the recording is going to be available for this session. Now, one of the things I mentioned as we were going through all of that was using the element of surprise in your big picture. So as I've gone through all of the content, we've talked about what the big picture is, why you should use it, how to find it, and of course how to build it. And we've been coming out to my big picture here every time. Now, you're probably thinking that this is it. This is all there is to my big picture. Well, actually, there isn't. There is another little surprise here. If I just click a couple more times, there's another final message I want to give you. And that's that the big picture technique will help people remember your presentations. Okay, so I've just added a couple of extra little steps to the end of my presentation, and I've used another visual. So I've almost got a big picture inside another big picture, if you want to look at it that way, just to really give you a nice little surprise at the end there, and just to reinforce that core message. Okay, the big picture technique will help people remember your presentations. It will make them really, really powerful and engaging. Okay, so hopefully you've got that point across. And actually the image you can see there with the guy looking up at the cloud, that was an image I grabbed from Shutterstock as well. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the presentation, and hopefully you found that really useful. So I'm just going to pause for a second and give you a chance to kind of think about everything we've gone through there. And again, this is your chance now to use the chat box on the right hand side of the screen, or to use Twitter if you want to, and for me to answer some of your questions. So I'm just going to have a look at some of the questions that have come in already that my colleague here has highlighted, and see if we can answer those in the next 10 minutes or so. And like I said, I might stick around for a little bit longer just for any final questions that any of you might have. So let's have a look at the very first question. This has come in from Drew. Drew, thanks very much for your question. So they're asking, you write your script based on your mind map before creating your content, and there's a little bit of the question missing there. Let's see if I can bring my screen and make my screen a little bit bigger. Bear with me, Drew. Okay, there we go. Before creating your content in Prezi. So the question is, you write your script based on your mind map before creating your content in Prezi. The answer is yes, absolutely. Don't go anywhere near Prezi until you've done that. You know, and if you read, if any of you are really, really genuinely interested in becoming great presenters, then you've probably looked at presentation skills books and presentation design books. There's a really great one called The Secrets of Steve Jobs that I'm reading at the moment, and you'll see straight away that in the very first few pages it mentions that Steve Jobs, who was one of the gurus of presenting, he used a technique which he called analog to digital. So he would plan everything on paper first before he went anywhere near a presentation software. Of course, he wasn't using Prezi, he was using Keynote. But before he went anywhere near that software, he grabbed pen, paper, and started there. You will see phenomenal results if you do that. And my guess is that probably 80, maybe even 90% of you on this call right now are not doing that. And I think that's just because it's a trap we've all fallen into over the years when we're using PowerPoint. It's just very, very easy to open PowerPoint and start writing your presentation in there. Even if you decide after this webinar to not use Prezi and go back to using PowerPoint, I would say still work in that way. You'll find your PowerPoint presentations will become much better because of it. So thanks for that question, Drew. Hopefully that's answered that for you. Let's have a look at the next question. Is SWF format not better for the big picture instead of a PNG? So that's coming from Lisa. So just to explain that question to people, an SWF image is basically a vector image that doesn't pixelate when we zoom into it. And a PNG image is normally a photograph, and when we zoom in on that, then yes, of course, we will see the pixelation. So to answer your question, Lisa, technically yes, an SWF image is better to use as your big picture visual because of course it's not going to pixelate. It will give you a lot more flexibility, but I wouldn't let that restrict you. I wouldn't I wouldn't sort of take that response from me and say to yourself, right, I'm only ever going to use vector images, because chances are you'll probably find a lot of really great photographs to use that would be perfect for your presentations. So don't feel like you can't use those, but just be careful about the areas you zoom into. And I'll give you a quick example on my screen here. Let's say, for instance, that I wanted to use this handsome looking chap that's on my presentation. Maybe I wanted to use him as my big picture for whatever reason. Okay, I would zoom in maybe to a white space. So maybe I'm talking about good dental health. So I could zoom in on his teeth here, and we've got quite a nice white space there that actually doesn't look too pixelated. So there's no reason at all why I shouldn't use that space when I'm zooming into content. It doesn't have to be a vector image all the time. And then when we zoom back out, we can see that handsome chap there again. He is quite good looking, actually, isn't he? Quite like myself, of course. It was an image on myself, but I thought I'd better not use that. There I go, rambling, see? That's what I said you shouldn't do in presentations, and now I'm doing it. So hopefully that's answered your question. And also, just to add on to that, Lisa, sometimes you might want to do both. You might want to use a really good PNG image, but place SWF images on top of that. So that's something to think about as well when you get a little bit more advanced. So let's have a look at another question that's come in from Lawrence. Are the images you can search for in Prezi free to use? Yes, they are free to use, but what you need to be careful of is copyright. So inside the Prezi software, right next to the Google search box, there is actually a little drop down, and in that drop down there is a tick box that you should definitely click on, because that will remove copyrighted imagery from your searches. So, don't get too carried away with searching for imagery because I've got you really excited about building this big picture. Make sure you've got that ticked, and make sure you aren't bringing in copyrighted imagery. That's really, really important. I don't want any of you to get sued off the back of this webinar because you're doing something I've told you to go and do. That would not be good at all. Someone else has asked a really important question. Is that you with hair in the presentation? I wish it was. If I had a head of hair like that, I'd be a happy man. But you've obviously been onto my LinkedIn page, or you saw the presentation at the very start there, the image of me. I am quite follically challenged, I have to admit. So no, that's not me with a head of hair, but I'd probably look something like that, I think. But thanks for that very important question. Let's just have a look at another one here. Let's see. Oh, so I think Drew, you actually came back off the first question you asked. You then said that you usually write your script after building your Prezi. That is really, really interesting. So what Drew is saying is that he or she, so apologies, is actually putting together all of their visuals inside Prezi and then writing their script. Now, I would say that that's the wrong way of working. I don't want to disappoint you here, but I will guarantee you that if you reverse that process, you will find quite a few things will happen. You'll definitely find that you'll save an awful lot of time building your Prezi. And the reason for that is because you'll know exactly what to put into your Prezi, because it's all going to be based around your script and your core message. And one of the things you'll definitely find is that, of course, it's just going to make a lot more sense to your audience, because again, it's going to be based around your core message and what it is you're actually saying, rather than your visuals dictating what you say. Your visuals need to be dictated by what you're saying, if that makes sense. So I would say go back to the drawing board and just reverse that process. Use the process that I showed you a second ago, and let me know how you get on. And Drew, I'm actually going to look up your email address once we're finished here, and maybe just drop you a line, because I'd really like to see or hear back from you in a few weeks' time and see how you get on working in the way that I'm telling you to work. That'd be really interesting. Okay, I'm just going to have a quick scan through some of the other questions that might have come in that we've got a bit more time for here. Let's have a look at this one at the very bottom of the screen. So just like me, this person, Lisa, again writes, creates Prezis for other people. Do you let them write the script themselves? That's a really good question. So what Lisa's saying here is she designs presentations for other people. Maybe it's colleagues of her, or maybe she's a presentation designer like ourselves. So yes, we do let them write their own script, because of course they need to be comfortable in what they're actually going to say. I would never volunteer to write a script for someone, because of course I don't know their subject matter as well as they do. That needs to come from them. One thing that I do though from time to time is, once they give me their script and their core message and things like that, once I have a read through it, of course my Prezi brain starts to kick in, and I start to come up with really good ideas for a big picture. And then sometimes that big picture might mean that the script gets tweaked slightly. So if I come up with, say, a big picture for, well, maybe the one you saw a second ago, or any of you who were on our last Prezi webinar that talked about how to avoid death by Prezi, the big picture for that was like a flight safety card. And there was lots of pictures of people throwing up, and there was aeroplanes and things like that, because that's what we were talking about, trying not to make people throw up when they view your presentation. So that's a good example, because for that I actually wrote the script, and it wasn't until I started writing the script that I got ideas to use those kind of visuals. So that then kind of meant I would go back over the script and change my wording slightly to fit with the visuals that I was actually putting in place. So I think it's a back and forth process. Always let them write their own script, but when you come up with the visuals, you might want to say to them, this keyword you've got here, you might want to change it to X, because I'm using a visual of this now, and that would just link much nicer. So hopefully that makes sense, Lisa, but that's a really, really good question. Another question that's just come in from Mandy. Hello, Mandy. Thanks very much for your question. Is it possible to get access to the previous webinar recordings? Yes, it is. They are actually all available on YouTube right now. So if you go to YouTube and just type in Death by Prezi, or type in Prezi webinars, you should see those. One of the things I'm going to do, I'm just going to make a note for myself as well to do this. I'm going to make all of those available from our website, and of course I will email all of you who have attended the link to that. And so they will all be there as well. But if you did miss any of them, and if you'd rather just sit in on a session like this and hear my dulcet tones again, then you're a glutton for punishment. But we will be repeating some of those webinars, because quite a few people have been asking, are they going to be run again because I couldn't make the last one, and so on. So yes, they're available online, and yes, we'll be repeating them as well. Lisa's also said, thanks very much. It should make her job a lot easier. You're welcome. That's what I'm here for. And let's have a look. Have we got time for one more question? Let's have a look at this one here. Is it possible to see a screenshot of the Prezi edition you have used to create this presentation? The idea to learn how to put the images in Prezi to make the big picture technique. When you say Prezi edition I've used to create this presentation, I'm guessing you mean the template. So that's coming from Ariel. So Ariel, I'm guessing you mean the template I've used for this particular Prezi. It's actually really easy to find yourself. If you just go to Prezi, hit the new button to create a presentation, you should get a list of templates appear. And about halfway down that list of templates, you will see the visuals of all of the picture frames and everything there. So feel free to use it. And one of the things I might do is actually make my presentation here a reusable Prezi. So you'll be able to go and find that again, either from our website or from my own Prezi license if you want to hunt me down on Prezi, and you'll be able to hit the make a copy button and copy that yourself, and then plagiarize that and pass it off as your own work. I won't take offense at all. Okay, so really good questions coming through there. Thank you very much for those. If there are any more questions at all, then please feel free to use the chat box. I'm going to stick around for another 5 minutes or so, but that's all we've got time for at the moment. I would love to just keep talking to you about Prezi, but of course we can't do it all at once, so we're breaking it down into these very short webinars. And one of the things I'd love to hear from you is what you would also like to know about Prezi. Maybe you've seen some great Prezis out there and you're wondering, how do people do that? So if there are any other subjects you would like to hear me talking about, then please feel free to use the chat box or drop us an email on info@thepresenter.com. Talk to me on Twitter as well and let me know on there. Just use the hashtag PreziWebinar. We're very easy to find. So, keep the conversations going, and hopefully we'll see you again in one of our future webinars. So thanks very much for, again, being here on time. Really good to meet all of you, and I'm sure that we will be in touch in the future. Look out for an email from me in the next couple of days that will have the link to the recording of this session, and of course you'll have all of my contact details on there as well. So if you need any further training or Prezi support or Prezi design help with those, use my contact details and get back to us, and we'd love to help you guys out. So thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are in the world, and I look forward to working with you again. Take care.